Yes, I am concerned about how do the digital lenders access my conduct.
All right.
That is number one. The number of those people when I devote, they call. Yeah, how do they access the list of conduct
That
so
you
that they
have.
call?
Okay.
Then
all
number
right.
two is what does the law provide in terms of access to private data? Because I believe that is private data or personal data. Then number three is what are the provisions of the law to cushion such lenders against that malpractice.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Those three concerns.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice, for your question this morning. And I'm just going to throw it. Number one, Alstella, how do you access people's contacts?
We don't. So I think I'll give two scenarios, Tala and what DLAC members do, and then we have the scenario of the rogue lenders.
All right.
So I'm assuming Justice's challenge has been with potentially a rogue lender in that instance. And you know, we have seen scenarios where customers install the app on their phones and they're not aware of the different data points that are taken from their phones, and they don't approve anything, and that data is taken illegally in that sense. And this is what the new Data Protection Act is coming in to address, where, you know, we're setting ourselves at par, as Kevin was mentioning, with global standards such as the GDPR, and thinking through customers have agency over their data and information. So as a lender, if there's any information or data that is needed, then is the customer aware of what is needed and do they consent? Secondly, the contract is, if I'm taking a loan, if you're taking a loan from Tala, the contract is with Tala and you, and does not include anyone else.
True.
So as such, no one else should be contacted, and those are the instances that are clearly legal. And now with the new, you know, CBK regulations, then customers will actually have a direct place to be able to report. Sorry, these types of challenges. On the other front, I think it's just important to educate consumers around, you know, how digital lending works. So digital lending comes out of the premise of a lot of customers within the market did not have a formal financial credit history. And as such, if you're not salaried, you could not access credit. You can't walk into a bank. What will you have to present? So think of this as a similar scenario to how if you were to go to take a loan from a bank today, you'll show up with your pay slips, bank statements, everything.
A whole lot of process.
Exactly. So it was more of, can we identify alternative forms of data that will enable us to unlock credit for the millions of Kenyans who don't have a formal credit history. And as such, this became things like M-Pesa statements, which Tala uses. And from that, we're able to understand, oh, okay, this is the credit profile of this customer, and we're able to give you credit in that sense. And now, specifically speaking for Tala, if you log on to the Tala app today, all the data points that are needed to make a decision are presented to you on the first page with reasons why, and you have to approve to be able to continue. So customers have an understanding of what is required, and just the last point is the new Data Protection Act requires lenders to pick the data only the data that is required. So you shouldn't just collect data for the sake of collecting data. It's more of what is the data that is required for you to be able to make a credit or an underwriting decision and cap it at that.
Yeah. All right. You talked about access to M-Pesa statements, and you also mentioned an aspect of consent. What if me, as the client, does not consent to you accessing my M-Pesa statement? Like, do I have a choice as far as what you can access and what you can't access?
Yeah. So think of it as it's consumers are not at the bottom of this. They're not getting the shorthand. That's why I draw a parallel to banks. If you go to your bank today and your bank tells you, hey, I would want to see your pay slips to be able to give you credit, you can't say, give me credit and I won't give you my statements. So that is pretty much the same thing, right? It's more of, because people don't have this formal, you know, forms of data, such as they're not formally employed, so to speak, then what are alternative forms of data that we're able to access that are not intrusive but help us to increase confidence to give you money? Because I can't just, you know, as a lender, you can't just give, you can give money to everyone.
I understand that. But now the question is, so do I know, me as the consumer, do I know that you are accessing my M-Pesa statements? Is that in the policy? Do people know?
Yes.
Or is it a matter of you back end, you know, data collection?
No,
Right?
it has to be consensual, and that's what I say it as. We believe that you know, consumers have agency over their data. That means today, if you open the Tala app, you will see a list of all the data points that are needed to make a decision, and you have to approve. That is also included in our privacy policy.
All right.
So all this information is given to customers beforehand. However, now there's a challenge on the rogue lender side where this information is not presented, and customers find themselves at the short hand of the stick.
Yes, in a very bad place. Okay, then. And then there was another question. So he had 3 questions. So let me just cap this too, right? For you, Kevin. So what does the law provide as far as access to private data, and also what are some of the provisions, that is according to the law, that cushions the lenders against, you know, the small practices, and of course one of them was being harassed by some of this mobile digital lenders?
So one, I'd just like to add on to what my colleague Mumbi said. In lending, the 3 main things we're looking at when we are interacting with a customer is, are they fraudulent? Right? So one of the reasons we take data is so that we confirm that they're who they say they are. Right? The second reason is willingness to repay. This is that we're taking data to determine, do you normally repay your loans when you're given a loan? Right? Because one of the big misconceptions about lending is that it's about money going out. We actually make money when we are paid back. And that's very important to us. So do you pay back your loans on time? Are you an honest person? We call it the honest metric. Is this somebody, the person we're dealing with, are they honest? If they're having financial issues, will they come and tell us in good time so that we can plan? Right? So willingness. And then the third thing we use data for is ability. So the ability, I can say, is Winnie wants 1 million shillings. But when we look at her bank statements, she can only afford 200,000. It would be morally wrong, right? Not bad business. It's also morally wrong to give you 1 million shillings knowing very well that you cannot pay. So that's what we use data for, right? So from that context, what I'd tell the customer who called is, that's what we use your data for, to determine those 3 things. Now, the law allows us, as Mombi said, to collect the data required to make a credit decision. But then more than that, it asks us to make sure that it's in simple language and that you expressly consent. That means that it's not just reading. You have to confirm that you've seen and read,
and you have read and understood,
you press confirm. So that's what the law says. If we are found in breach of those laws, according to the Data Protection Act, we're liable to a fine. And the fine is quite considerable if we're found guilty. On the CBK Amendment Act side, this comes under the Consumer Protection section. No, there's a section, within the Act, which is mostly focusing on protecting the consumer, which, if people remember, was the core message and the core focus of the Digital Lenders Association's efforts. Is how do we better protect the customer through this digital financial service, which is lending. So those are the 2 points that sort of make to the consumer that called in and say, 1, the law is very clear. 2, this is what we do with your data. And then 3, if we do breach any of those laws, we're actually subject to huge fines.